Welcome to Short and to the Point, a podcast from the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Here's your host, Jessica Kleinschmidt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Short and to the Point on Awful Announcing and the Comeback. Jessica Kleinschmidt here. This is our 50th episode of the show. 50. You guys know I can't count that high, so this is a miracle for me. Feels more than 50, feels less than 50, a little bit of both, if that makes sense, which it should. I'm so thankful to all of you who have listened to each and every episode, or if you're just now tuning in, I appreciate your love. Honestly, this has been such a passion project for me. And I know producer Philip appreciates it as well. We weren't sure where this was going to go or what road it was going to take, but it's turned into this amazing experience where I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping you guys learn something too. And to grow up watching some of these people and seeing how good they were at their jobs, and for them to join me on this podcast has been amazing. Our episode is perfect for emulating those words. ESPN's Karl Ravech joins the show today. He, of course, will be calling the Home Run Derby coming up during the All-Star break. I'll be in Tahoe watching this thing. It's going to be amazing, getting a tan on. He'll be joined by friends of the podcast, Eduardo Perez and Buster Olney, who will be the analyst and the sideline reporter, and Alden Gonzalez will join the sidelines with Buster for coverage. It's one of my favorite events every year because there's babies running around. We get to see the actual guys, who they are, on the heartbeat under their uniform while they're hitting bombs. What is better than that? So far, only Gunnar Henderson has agreed to join the Home Run Derby, and we'll see the rest of the participants as they go. There were some new rules that have been implemented for this event, and we're going to see how that works. It looks like it's actually going to be better. If you ever watch the Home Run Derby, which I do every year, you can see the guys just losing breath, losing some steam. So I think this will actually benefit them. So here's my chat with Karl Ravech. All right, Karl, thanks so much for joining Short and to the Point. And I was talking about this, or thinking about this, back to your time in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to now, 30 plus years with ESPN. When you think of that journey,
really, you're going to do that to me, Jess?
I know.
You're really
you know what?
You're
Well, you started your career at 2, so you're 32 now. It's pretty impressive work.
That's so kind of you.
When you think back to that journey, what comes to mind?
I haven't thought back to that journey very often. So now that you're asking me to do that, I would say that what comes to mind is the people you meet, the experiences you have, the willingness to try different things, to get out of your comfort zone. In Harrisburg, I was a weekend sports anchor and a weekday sports reporter. And then occasionally I would go out and do news. And it started actually in Binghamton, where I would do news, and I would use the camera and shoot my own highlights. So all of those things, I think, helped build a good foundation. And then getting to ESPN, I started there, doing overnight SportsCenters. And then the Baseball Tonight show became a possibility. And for me, SportsCenter at that point had become a little bit rote. It was routine, and I wanted something a little more off the cuff, and that was live, and it was reactive to those games and highlights. And it became a huge, huge success, given Home Run Derby, given the home run races that we had with McGuire and Sosa. So I think the learning experience, the experiencing a lot of different things helped the foundation. And my son Sam does this stuff, and I would tell any young person, like, the most important thing you can do is be able to relate to what a director is doing, what an audio technician is doing, what a photographer is doing. You got to be able to speak the language of everybody involved in a broadcast, because if you look in the mirror and think you're the only one dealing with some stuff that particular day or night, you couldn't be more wrong. And the only way this works is if everybody is working together.
I agree. And you mentioned Sam, and I followed a lot of his work in the minors as well. What's it been like watching him and joining him on this journey, having the father-son combo covering sports media together?
Yeah, well, he did it a little differently. He went to college at Pepperdine, and then got into sports broadcasting, meaning he was play-by-play guy for the Richmond Flying Squirrels. I went into the studio, and I have encouraged him to get into the studio. I think the versatility is another valuable part of this thing. You know, the one-trick pony thing doesn't really work, especially at a place like ESPN. You've got to be able to cover a variety of sports. You've got to be able to do a variety of things. And it's been great to see him move into the studio and host the college game day stuff on the digital platform, which I think is wonderful. So those opportunities weren't there when I started. It was a studio. It was ESPN, and then it was ESPN2, and then it was ESPN News, and there was an ESPN phone, and there was now an ESPN app. So I got a chance to see all of these things, but the concept is similar. Be able to do a number of things, and if you look at the most successful people at our company, they can host. Many of them do both play-by-play and host. Many of them have podcasts, etc. You have to be versatile.
Did you notice at the beginning of your career that versatility maybe wasn't as prominent as it is now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, when we were hired, when I was hired in 1993, it was you're a SportsCenter anchor, and then within the hosting roles, there may be an RPM tonight. There could be an NHL tonight. For me, it was baseball tonight. And then slowly but surely, you started to realize, you know, you kind of after 30 years, but in this case, after about 15, I'd like to try to do something different. So now you're going to host college basketball pregame and halftime and postgame. So to the credit of all those at ESPN over the years, they afforded you the opportunity to go and try these things. And if it fit for the person and then it fit for the company, then great. So yeah, the play-by-play stuff for me started later than it did the studio stuff. But without the willingness of the people at ESPN to say, let's try, you go ahead and try it, get out of your comfort zone, it was wonderful. And it started with golf and college basketball and Little League and college baseball and Major League Baseball. So I've been incredibly lucky over these 3 decades.
And what was that transition like? Because a lot of people could have been comfortable just doing SportsCenter forever. It's obviously a great gig and you get into the routine, but you wanted to get out of your comfort zone. Where does that mentality come from, and why is that important?
I think, Jess, being a studio host, SportsCenter where you're working with somebody else, but then I think in particular, when you're hosting baseball tonight, and whether it's Harold Reynolds or Peter Gammons or John Kruk or the 50 or 60 different analysts, you learn to work with an analyst. You know, it's never really been about me. My job is to make the person next to me as comfortable as they can be, to poke and prod every now and then, because I hear things in a green room where we're watching games, and I will not hopefully forget them, and then I bring them up during the show. Maybe the analyst forgot, like I made that point, and you try to lead them down that path. That stuff I think helped me immensely when it comes to the play-by-play. I got a chance to sit next to so many and sit in a college basketball halftime with Jay Williams or Seth Greenberg or Jay Billis, and you realize, like, in a sense, I grew up watching sports. I think I can do the play-by-play. How do I make the analyst better? What do I got to do to make them the best? It's the way I look at play-by-play people. We're the condiment to the meal. We're the ketchup. We're the salt. We're the mustard. People come to the table to watch the game. We can enhance the flavor of that game a little bit, but the analyst is really going to be the important ingredient. We're just there to kind of make sure that they're enjoying it as much as they can, but they're there for the game, not necessarily for, I don't think, anybody that's doing the game.
That's true. I love that. Enhance the flavor. That's beautifully said.
Right.
We're not eating a plain hot dog out here, y'all. We are not doing that. Not on my watch. And it was really cool. You embraced the pitch clock. So this new change, of course, that was brought to the league. Did that surprise you at all, considering you've had so many years in watching the sport? And, you know, we all love an old school guy. I feel like you want to keep the soul intact with the game, but you very much embraced it.
Yeah, I wouldn't put myself in the category of old school. I know there's a lot of people that are like that. I don't look at myself that way. I've had enough conversations over these years with players big name players, managers, to hear what they were saying. And Jess, they were acknowledging, like, this game is too slow. When we went into those 7-inning doubleheaders, you wouldn't believe how many big name players were telling me, I love this. We need more of this. In fact, I think we asked a manager, if you could change the game now, what would you do? 7-inning doubleheaders. People love those because they were shorter.
Yeah.
And to Rob Manfred's credit, to the players union's credit, thankfully they recognized like what was going on, and the attention span and the tablets and the phones doesn't work anymore. So how do we make this pace go quicker, and how do we bring more action and excitement to the game? I literally, before we got on this podcast, had a buddy of mine come over and said, I was at a Red Sox Yankees game a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday night. I think it went extra innings. He's like, it was 3 hours long. It was the greatest thing ever. Like, there are so many nights, Jess, we do games and it feels like when we're done, that would have been a 4.5 hour game, and it ends in 2:45. It ends in 3 hours. That's a win for everybody, especially the younger fan. I think that that they hit a home run, and I'm glad both the players and the owners got on the right side of that. That was huge.
Agree. I've been stuck in San Francisco in a 14-inning Giants game more times than I can count, and I'm very happy I don't have to do that anymore. And it's interesting. You mentioned the managers, and this is one thing that I really like that you said. You said, I don't root for teams. I now root for people. Who are those people that you root for, and why? Alex Cora comes to mind for me when it comes to you.
Yeah. And look, anybody that I've ever worked with, whether it was Dusty Baker or Booney or Buck Showalter, Francona, Cora for sure. I think at some point in your career, in your life, you can appreciate the joy and success of other people instead of being jealous and envious of it. And in this case, I want every one of them who are dealing with being a manager, especially in this time, and how difficult it is and the challenges they face and the vitriol on social media. I want Aaron Boone to win a World Series so bad. I want Cora to win another one so bad. I'm so sort of bothered and saddened that Buck Showalter hasn't won one yet, because he is way beyond capable enough of doing it. It was such a cool thing to see Dusty win last year. So yeah, I don't root for teams. By the same token, Jess, I'd say that anybody that says they're completely objective, that may be true. You may have the ability as a broadcaster to be objective, but everybody came from somewhere, and you grew up rooting for some team, some helmet, some uniform, some city that you grew up in. So I think you all have those inherent biases that you'd like to see your team succeed, and if for no other reason, for your family that all live in that area. My family's from Massachusetts. It was really important for the Red Sox, I think, to win a World Series, which they did, and that's meaningful to them. But now that I've seen my family celebrate, let's let Dusty Baker win a World Series. Cool, because these are things, when you go through this journey in life and you're dedicating so much time and energy and time away from your family, it'd be nice to pay it off with something that people will remember you for, and one of those things is a championship. So yes, I root for the people, and that includes players too. But in the case of your question, it does have to do with the managers.
Definitely. And on that note, you mentioned Alex Cora. He gets the most out of his players. He has a very unique communication style. What makes him stand out for him amongst the other managers in the league?
Yeah, it's funny. I think what I learned from sitting in a green room with these guys is they just see the game a little bit differently. And whether they played, Buck Showalter was incredible at sort of observing like little minutia things about either where a guy stands in the box or why did he shift over there. Cora is that way too, and they all have this ability. And I think that clubhouse culture and being around people who don't necessarily come from the same area you did, let alone the same country or background, that ability to be the spoon that stirs, the soup, the porridge, whatever it is, to make that concoction taste the best, meaning work the best, are incredible. The other thing that happens, Jess, I think, to people, they eventually have children of their own, and he's had children of his own. And I think having kids allows you the ability to relate to people and to see that everybody has good days and failures and bad days, and they may like a flavor of ice cream you may not like, or want to dress this way or wear something. And that openness to all of that, as long as it contributes to the greater good of what we're trying to do as a team, he's really good at that. And I think that's one of his great traits, not to mention he's incredibly talented when it comes to being bilingual. And that's a huge part of what we're doing in the major league world.
I agree. And I just had a conversation with Bobby Crosby about this just yesterday. And it seems like sometimes their relationship with the game changes, because he'd wanted nothing to do with baseball a year after he retired, or was attempting to retire. And now he has such a knack for instructing, and he didn't even know that existed. He didn't know he possessed that characteristic. And now he's giving back, and he just sees the game so much differently now. And the transition of that is kind of born after they're done playing in certain aspects. Obviously, they don't always play, but it's such an interesting characteristic that these guys have.
Yeah, and I think, Jess, because I think when you're playing, you are so obsessed with success. How are we going to make this work? How am I going to get ahead? You can't think of anything else. And I know that when you speak to managers in particular, or those that have left the game, and even the analysts that I work with, they remind everybody, and it's so true, how hard this game is. It is so hard to play baseball, let alone succeed at it. And that ability to empathize with the player when they're in a 2 for 22 slump is a huge deal, as opposed to the player that's in the 2 for 22 who goes home and literally is beating himself up. Like, I can't get out of this. They spiral. And when you're around veteran people in this game, you know, he's going through a little tailspin right now. Like, this is not the end of the world. You're in second. You're a very good team that's only going to likely have a period where you go 10-1. Like, that's how this game works. And to get caught up in the day-to-day, minute-to-minute stuff, the people that have experience or leave the game have a great 300,000-foot view of this thing and be like, whoa, pump the brake. The world isn't ending here. Let's just pump the brakes and things will change. And that's what happens in baseball.
And I think of like a lot of the players, and I'm sure you've observed this when it comes to the successful guys, the ones who do have pretty long careers. Obviously, injury is something that they can't avoid, but the ones that continue, they stay even keeled. They deal with the ups and downs. Those certainly take place. Have you witnessed some of these guys where you can just kind of get a sense of who they are and how they're going to have a pretty illustrious long career?
Well, I mean, we just look at Aaron Judge's season. It didn't start out very well, and all of a sudden he's on his record-breaking home run pace, let alone all the other historical numbers that he's put up. And that wouldn't have been the way when he was a rookie. In spite of having a good rookie, it wouldn't have been the way. Freddie Freeman is the guy that comes to mind. You know, peaks and valleys. He didn't have a lot of doubles to start the season. All of a sudden, those totals are going up. By the same token, I think there are many of them who, while you would think they would be incredibly secure, because this game is so hard and it literally can come and go with a flight from one city to another. Something clicks, something unclicks. It's very fragile. That those that have the ability to recognize, especially rookies that get into the game and they start 0 for 15 or 0 for 20. Part of me empathizes with Jackson Holliday and the way things went in Baltimore when he first got there, and it didn't go the way he wanted. Nobody's got more experience being in a clubhouse or experiencing ups and downs than Jackson Holliday. He has seen it forever. And yet, you know, you get caught up in the spin cycle and it's not working for you. And now you're going to go back down. And that's for these guys that have had all this success along the way, to be told, you know, that we're going to send you back down to work on things. Like, yeah, that's put yourself in their shoes or in your own shoes where somebody's saying, yeah, it's not where it needs to be. That's a difficult pill to swallow. That's an ego hit. And geez, these guys all got there because partly they have healthy egos. We know we're better. We can succeed. We're going to have success. I'm going to push through it. And sometimes just pushing through it doesn't work. You got to take your time. You got to go back. You got to listen. You got to watch video. You got to hear what the coaches have to say. So there's pills to swallow for sure.
I want to go back to your chat about Aaron Judge. People love to comp. We talked about the rookies. There's always a comp when it comes to these drafts, but is there any comp when, I don't want to throw somebody underneath the bus. Somebody said Aaron Judge could be possibly peak Barry Bonds in certain aspects. I think Barry Bonds was in a different era. It's a different apples to oranges fiasco. When it comes to Aaron Judge and his stardom, is there too much pressure on him to kind of save the game? Or if you want to compare to Barry Bonds or Mark McGwire versus the Sosa home run race, which made me fall in love with the game, but that wasn't necessarily because of the home runs. That was all the pop culture and the stuff surrounding it. Is there pressure on Aaron Judge or Shohei, whoever, to save the game of baseball?
Yeah, I would say if this were years ago, that would be a conversation. I don't think the game needs saving like it once did. I think the game was in trouble. And I don't mean it was ever going to go away, but it was in trouble when it took 4 hours to play. A Yankees-Red Sox Sunday night game, 4.5. Like, that wasn't good. The product wasn't good. The product is really good on the field. The players, the young players, are phenomenal, you know, whether it's Bobby Witt or Gunnar Henderson. So the focus is not just on one guy. I don't think Shohei Ohtani is responsible for saving baseball, partly because I don't believe baseball currently needs to be saved. I think what baseball has to acknowledge is we live in a football society. We live in a football world. So the grand old pastime is no longer present number one. It's not. It's very easy to see. Football rules the roost. Baseball absolutely has a huge place on the Mount Rushmore of sports, but it has shifted. You know, 50s and 60s, baseball was it. And all of a sudden, football and college football and all that, it's past it. And now baseball fits somewhere in between the NBA and the NHL. And that's where it is right now. But the changes they've made, I think, help immensely. And there's no individual that is being asked to save the game. The game is in good hands. The game is in great shape. There are young players that are superstars who it's easy to, to look at and be, I want to invest in them. The Orioles, the Mariners, there's teams, the Reds. I want to invest, like an Ellie De La Cruz, sign me up all day long. O'Neill Cruz, thanks very much. The Mariners pitching, sign me up. I'm watching all that stuff.
And you mentioned the younger guys.
And Adley and the rest of the Orioles, all in. It's not just.
No, I'm just saying, no, keep going, because I have a younger guy's question after that.
I was just going to say, regardless of the city you're in, it seems like, and we're about to go through the draft, and we watched Wyatt Langford last year, and look at what Paul Skeens is doing for the Pirates. Like, it is. Nobody needs to save it. The game is as sturdy, I think, as it's been in a long time, and it has to do with the rules, but certainly the ability of the players and the fact that the younger players are making impacts immediately.
I love that. And on that note with the younger guys, can you think of another era where we were embracing these younger guys, or on top of that, the amount of talent that these younger guys possess?
Yeah, I think part of that has to do with all the shortstops that are currently in the game, Witt and Henderson, and the list of shortstops that are impacting the game. I mentioned the two, O'Neill and Ellie De La Cruz. There's a lot of them. It does harken back to when Jeter and A-Rod and Nomar, Omar Vizquel was playing. Larkin was sort of on the end. Like, we've had this. So that's what I at least compare the shortstops of today to that class. And again, we know what Jeter ended up doing with his rings and his numbers, and certainly Rodriguez and Nomar put up massive numbers, but it's hard to ignore the athletic ability of Ellie De La Cruz. It's impossible to ignore the speed of Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson. So in that way, I think there's some comps where you ask, like, is this unique? It's happened before, and I'm sure if you go back even further, like, we've had pockets of particularly great shortstops, first basemen, pitchers. This is another era of shortstops. that reminds me of what we've had before.
And we'll go into Gunnar Henderson a little bit, but what about the power these guys have? Because shortstops, if you weren't hitting a certain amount of home runs, nobody really batted an eye. And now we're actually seeing the display of the slugging and the ISO and these home runs from the shortstops. That's pretty impressive over the years that we're able to embrace the defensive capabilities of these guys in the middle infield, but also they're hitting home runs and they're hitting them hard as well.
Right. We've tweaked the rules to the home run derby. We could literally have a home run derby made up of shortstops. It would be unbelievable. I mean, if you have the shortstops in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Baltimore, remember Xander Bogaerts was a shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
They've obviously made a change in San Diego, but there are so many shortstops and there are so many things that have allowed the pitchers to gain advantages. Now, all of a sudden, some of the technology, some of the information is catching up where you talk about launch angle and bat speed and exit velocity, et cetera. They have now developed an ability to, whether it's a slider, a changeup, a fastball that has very little vertical drop to it, how to hit that, how to get on top of it. So, yeah, it is remarkable, their bat speed and their ability to generate power when they don't necessarily have the biggest bodies on the team or on the field, but it's crazy. And we could have a phenomenal shortstop only home run derby for sure.
We should tap into that. I think that would be fun. And you mentioned some of these changes in the home run derby. And it looks like they're going to benefit the players as well. And you're embracing them because in the past, these guys, we've all seen it. They lose a lot of steam over the rounds, but there's some positive changes upon us for the 2024 home run derby.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, the derby again has kind of gone the way of the overall sport. The pacing is going to be better. There's not going to be, hopefully, as physical demand on the players, which I think was a deterrent to those that would think about it. And I'm not sure that we're going to get, the judges of the world to jump back into the pool. And he's done it before and he's won it before. I think you're going to have to see how these rules play out. But the fact that there's a limited number of pitches in a 3-minute window to start. So 40 pitches, not 50, not 60, not 48, 40 or 3 minutes, whatever comes first. And that's it. You're done. And the other part that I like, it used to be a bracket format where Jessica was number 1 and Karl was number 8, and we would face off against each other. Mm-hmm. And Jessica would hit 37 homers and I'd hit 35 and I would be eliminated. But everybody else in the competition, no one hit 35. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. I hit 35 and that guy hit 30 and 28 and they're moving on. So now it's the top 4 from the first round. I think that's great. If you put up 1, 2, 3, or 4 as far as totals, then you're moving on. And I think that's cool. We're going to recognize those that hit a ball further. I think 425 gets you a bonus. That's huge. Let's play it out. Let's see how it goes. But I think and I hope it encourages those that we'd all love to see to get back into it. It's not going to be that big a toll on your body that you may risk some type of either injury or getting so tired. So I hope it works that way. Clearly, that's the intent, and it feels like Major League Baseball and the players, they listen to each other on what needs to happen to continue this, because it's such a phenomenal event. It is such a cool thing to see these guys hit a baseball over the wall so often.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the aspect of like these little babies running around while there's like a home run performance. It's like the best of both worlds for me. It's my absolute favorite. So you get to see like the dad action and then like what they can do at the plate. And it's my absolute favorite thing. And I'm glad you mentioned the possibility of injury because it's always brought up. We had Torey Lovello on the show recently when we were doing the Diamondback series. And of course, Ketel Marte would be his guy if that were the case. But he was also very honest about, I'm nervous sometimes about the injury aspect to it. And he said, I love watching Marte hit batting practice. It's a beautiful swing, of course. And I think we can't fault on that. How do you find the balance of not worrying about injury? Obviously, the showcase is in the middle of the season, but you still want to give the fans what they want. And it's a competition that these guys love as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. I clearly think that these rules are designed to mitigate some of those concerns or anxieties. Um, but I think by the same token, and this is not to dismiss the possibility of injuries, but if you're really concerned about injuries, I think we'd focus a lot more on the pitcher's arms, not in the Derby, but just in what's going on in the game in Major League
Yeah.
Baseball. You want to talk about a problem? That's a problem. And there are no real rules. It's not like Little League where there's a pitch limit.
Yeah.
We try our damnedest to make sure that these guys are are not exceeding what they did the year before. That sometimes they're getting a 6 day of rest, but too many of them are blowing out. I think to some degree, when somebody does a derby and then there's this connection to the derby and an injury, it feels magnified. I've always
Mhm.
wondered, Jess, and maybe you have an opinion about this. It always feels like and has felt like, and I've done sports for 30 plus years at the network that covers sports. Baseball's magnifying glass seems to be a little bit bigger than other sports when it comes to controversies, when it comes to whether it's performance enhancing drugs, whether it's injuries. They just seem to be held to a different, higher standard, or what's wrong. There's a there just is a greater level of panic and reaction about baseball, to me, than there is with the other sports. And I look at it, that's a sign of respect, but I haven't quite been able to figure it out.
It's I can agree on the respect factor, but I remember, yeah, because when I would have to tweet out, like when Tatis Jr. got suspended for steroids, and obviously I cover the A's, so Ramon Laureano, and he was suspended, compared to reporting on an NFL player going through the same process. The amount of games, obviously the amount of games are different, but when an NFL player did it, it was kind of like, oh, that sucks. When an MLB player does it, it's the worst thing ever.
Right.
And I think it's
Right.
because MLB always has that dark cloud around it, because there was that pressure on Barry Bonds because he was that guy. And of course, with all of those allegations, but I'm right there with you when it comes to those aspects. I think people are just anticipating every baseball player is on it. And NFL, if it happens every now and then, it's like, oh, that's every now and then. So I think
Right.
that's kind of an aspect too, but I'm right there with you. I don't understand it. And there's, like you said, a respect there. But if you're going to come at us with these certain negative, I guess, vibes, but you're not constantly checking in with us on what's going on throughout the season, why
Right.
do you only care about us when a guy gets in trouble for PEDs? Like, what are we doing here?
Part of me thinks, Jess, too, it has to do with the fact that so many people that attend games, watch games, consume games, gamble on games, because we can do that now.
Yeah.
Everybody, it feels like more people played baseball, whether it's Little League, having a catch, than they did organized football or organized basketball.
That's true.
I just think there's this ability to relate to what those guys are doing on a very, very basic level. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball, you run. Everybody has done that, I think, at some point in our lives. Not everybody's put on shoulder pads. Not everybody has dunked a basketball. So I think there's this heightened sensitivity to, well, like, why are you doing that? Like, just let baseball be baseball. And clearly, the cat came out of the bag years ago with regards to always trying to get ahead and do things that would give you the upper hand. And I think it rubs more people because they can relate to the game or have played it. It rubs them differently than other sports. I think there's just that relationship. It's very, very close. The fan and the sport are very close.
And there's a romance about baseball that I don't think there's a romance about other sports. It's a different kind of romance. Oh, did we lose him? Oh, are you back?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was talking about romance in baseball and you left, and that made me very vulnerable, and that's okay. That's okay. But there's a specific romantic aspect to baseball that you can be romantic about all the sports. And this isn't me moneyballing it, but there's a different kind of love that people have for this game. And it's just a little bit more deep than I think other sports. That's just me though.
No, well, yeah, but I think baseball movies are a great example of that. I think people will go to baseball movies and be able to relate to Bull Durham, to be able to relate to, there's no crying in baseball. All of these axioms that we're literally born and bred into, they relate. When when Dennis Quaid called home to say I'm going to the show, I cry. I cry every time. I mean, it's such, because it's such an accomplishment. Like, it's so hard to do that. And that scene where he calls home and says, "You got to get on a plane and bring me my suit," or whatever the actual language is, like, I'm done. Like, because you have a great appreciation for how hard this stuff is. And sometimes you take it for granted because it looks like it comes so easily to certain guys, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. And we dismiss Bryce Harper, as a kid going all over the country to play. We dismiss Aaron Judge because he's so big. Like, well, of course he's going to do great. No, that's not why he does great. It's because he worked his ass off. All these players. Mookie Betts is such a good athlete. You think he just came out of the womb and that's it? Like, there was no effort, there was no work on all of the aspects of his game. All of these people work so hard. So I think when you mention romance, I think about movies much more than I do almost real life. And I don't know why they do such a good job of sensationalizing it, personalizing it, and making it feel intimate. And it's the most intimate of all games we have. There's no face mask on any of the players but the catcher. Everybody can see a guy being very vulnerable with an error. Everybody can see a guy get hit by a pitch and be hurt. It's right out there. It's right in front of you. And, that I give them a lot of credit for being willing to put themselves out there too.
And on that note, I was guilty of this until I started working in the game. We kind of put these guys on a pedestal. And now that I'm in the clubhouse, I see all the work that they put in. You mentioned, like, they do work their asses off. Are we making sure that we are reminding people that these are human beings? They did put the work in. Like, a lot of us saw them through the minors. We physically saw them put the work in. Are we still reminding people that these are human beings?
I appreciate you asking. I try. I appreciate that. I try all the time. And I think sitting in a booth with David Cohn or Eduardo Perez, the things that I think drive former players crazy much more than the physical errors are the mental errors. When there's when you're the trail runner and you get thrown out at second for seemingly no reason, those things drive ex-players crazy. The physical stuff happens all the time. A swing and a miss, a strikeout on a pitch that's moving 26 inches, that's going to happen. It is, it's brutal. And I'd say this about Little League and college too. You go try. I mean, I know, these fantasy camps that all these teams have, Jess, where you pay money and you go and you get in the batter's box. Good luck trying to hit a real major league pitch. I wouldn't go up there unless I was wearing a suit of armor and I was guaranteed that I wouldn't have somebody throw a pitch high and tight. I can't get out of the way. Like, what they do, and I say this about all athletes. We're watching Alcaraz and Tiafoe play tennis. Like, it's just sick what they do. It's crazy what Tiger Woods did, and I covered that, during his prime. It is crazy that these guys are trying to hit a ball that's traveling 103 miles an hour and it's moving. It's crazy, and they do it so well. It is such a hard game. Try to go out at third base and field a ground ball off the bat of Giancarlo Stanton, and you tell me how you're feeling when that thing either hits you or goes by you, or you catch it and you break your hand. Like, it's going to happen. So I remind people, I think it's really important. This is a hard game physically, hard game mentally, and it's a challenge to land in a city at 4 a.m. and then play a baseball game at 7. And no one's crying for them because their salaries are so great. It ain't easy.
I agree. And, on that note, as a member of the media and covering this game for as long as you've dealt with the changes, not just in the game, but from the media aspect, what are some of those major changes that you've had to adjust to covering the game from when you first got started?
Well, I think clearly the social media aspect of it is the most dramatic difference, beyond people watching games. I mean, the idea that I can sit at an airport or on an airplane and watch a live game is so cool. But I think the social media, I think the feedback, I think the negative sucks. I think I just don't understand why people are so mean. But again, maybe there's some envy and jealousy of these players and they're angry. That's one I can't relate to, but to me, that's the biggest thing. And thankfully, many of them, ignore it. They've learned to just flush it and not be impacted by it. But it's like a cruel world you enter. I don't quite get social media and that anger with regards to the media, the players, people doing media. It feels like some type of standard that the expectation it wouldn't even matter.
Yeah.
Like it becomes and is received very personally, and that shouldn't be what being a member of the media is about. So to me, social media and really the negatives of it, as opposed to the positives, are the biggest change I've seen beyond the obvious, which is like I said, how great is it to be able to watch baseball games on an airplane or on a beach or driving in a car? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely, social media has changed my life and my career, but if I could just take away the negative stuff, it would be, my mental health would be a lot better. Unfortunately, I hate admitting
100%.
that. Yeah.
We
It just
all would.
is.
And again, it's so bizarre. You know, your lessons that you've had, you know, it put a turtle shell on your back, I hope, and this stuff can just ball up and roll off you. But again, you talk about players being humans, we're all humans too. And the media faces a whole bunch of scrutiny just like the players do. And it's cruel and it's unusual and it's unnecessary. And it's such a big part of this. And I don't blame people who say, I'm done. I don't want anything to do with this. It's like, what possessed people to get on some platform and rip other people? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Why does that exist?
I agree. I completely agree. Before I let you go, if I want to, my goal in life, I want to introduce one or two new people to this beautiful game that I'm obsessed with. If I want to introduce a casual person, I'm not talking about a sports fan. If I want them to like baseball or get interested in it, how do I do that?
Right. So I used to have this conversation with myself when the game was struggling and these changes were coming. I would always say, if literally somebody was on the moon and had never seen a baseball game and they came down here, what do you think that they would devise a game that had nine innings in it? Like that just feels long. Like if you were literally to rewrite all the rules, what would you do? And this was during the 7-inning doubleheaders, which at the time allowed the game to be played in 2.5 hours. And there was this recognition like this is important to start these games and have some pace. You know, I do the Little League, Jess, and when you get to the third inning of a Little League game, which is 6 innings, there's an urgency. I always thought that urgency was really critical in the game of baseball, that while the second inning means as much as the eighth inning, it doesn't inherently feel like it means that much because there's so much more time to, overcome a deficit. But now, given that these games are played the way they are, and there are relievers coming in, and if you're trailing after 6 innings and Team A has their bullpen armed, like there is that urgency. So I would bring them to any baseball game and say, look, there's Garrett Cole, there's Tanner Houck, there is Walker Buehler in his prime, there's Paul Skeens, right? We Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, we have that set. So these two guys are now going to do something at the top of their game. I can't wait to have you guys or women just watch what they do. And then those guys are going to get in there and they're going to try to hit the baseball. Can you imagine what that's like? Just try to put yourself in that batter's box and that guy's through baseball 100 and you get a chance to hit it. And then you get a chance to run around the bases if you do. And hear all these people look around at this environment and they're going to cheer for you. Like I get chills. Like you don't get chills thinking about that opportunity or hitting a ball over the wall. And these people are going to go crazy for you. Like it's an easy game to sell. And that's what I would do. And I've often said, if somebody were to come down from the moon, what do I want to say to them about this great game of baseball? And that's how I would begin to frame it.
You just made my cheeks hurt from smiling. You just convinced me to love baseball all over again. I love that. That's such a brilliant way of thinking because it's a lot of responsibility, but also sometimes you don't have to. You can just kind of introduce the game, just trust me on this. And then at the end of it all, Karl, with us doing our jobs, we get to give them a fun little story or a good little storyline nugget about who this person is. And that's like the cherry on top, which I love.
Right. Yeah. And I'd say this, I mean, I work with analysts, but I also work with a whole bunch of reporters that cover the game, whether it's Tim Kirkshin or Peter Gammons or the late Pedro Gomez or Alden, Passon, they're all over the place. the other part of this that we didn't get into, which I would remind them, is the people that do report on this game are people who are in love with the game. Like, I don't think that many of them do this just as a job.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge passion because the demand on your time and being away from family and the hours are crazy. Like, it's in good hands that way too. There's a lot of incredibly passionate, smart people, Buster Olney, who cover this game at such a high level with such great respect and reverence for it. To be a fan of it is a really, really cool thing at this time in our lives, that you get all these different ways to consume the game with all these different opinions, whether it's yours or Sarah Lang's or Mike Petriello, like that. These are really, really smart people who are basically your window into the world of baseball, and trust them. They have the same passion for the game, if not more so than you do.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's good to show there's an extension there. And I think that's beautiful. Yeah, definitely. Karl, you've been amazing. Thanks so much for your time.
Anytime, Jess. We'll do it again.
Definitely. That was Karl Ravech of ESPN going over the new changes in the Home Run Derby. And of course, I love a guy who's seen the game in so many different facets as it's transitioned over the years, covering it for over 3 decades, and to come from, just the local news station into what he's doing now has been fantastic. I could talk about baseball with him all day, so I appreciate his time. Make sure you're tuning into the Home Run Derby. Like I said, it's one of my favorite events every year. Babies running around, home runs. You get to see the real personalities of these guys, because at the end of the day, they love this game. It's fun for them, and they love a good competition. I appreciate you tuning in to Shorten to the Point here on Awful Announcing and the Comeback. Thank you to producer Philip for always keeping this thing afloat for everyone on the website and on the podcast side. This is Jessica Kleinschmidt, and I'll see you next time.
Want even more short and to the point? Follow Jessica at KleinschmidtJD and head over to thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com.